Good evening and welcome to the stream. We'll see what we can get into this evening. We're going to do a little bit of spooky matter right now. We're going to try to get into it. Whatever part of the world you're in, whatever you might be doing, welcome to the stream. Let's see what we can get into.
Had heard many rumors about the Great Cartel, and one of my friends is an actual subscriber, serious subscriber, and I just happened to be over, and I actually listened to your programs, and I loved it.
Really good, for sure. Tell me about your please.
Okay, I actually worked with a fellow at a cable company over here, and he knew that I did some amateur ghost hunting, and we would talk about that. And he was kind of shy to show me, but he actually showed me his photographs that I entered in the contest. And that was the show. And that basically explains completely stuff that's been going on in the home. And when I saw that picture, I had never seen anything like that before. I had gotten orbs myself, but nothing ever like that.
The orbs are not what you was. And by the way, yours was over. The most positive card, we went 100, I think, positives on you for that, and he's still there. I mean, what's matter, but it's not qualified because somebody approached it from another website. Yours is an original, and it's pretty weird, and whoever took it, who took it?
This is my television stated.
Okay, well, he did a good job. I mean, to be able to create something like that with a camera.
It's open very much so. He didn't even really know what he had captured until he had seen it. Really good song. But before I was going to say, before all the iPhone applications and all the little things that you can do trickery with, it was before that even really evolved yet. So that was what made it easier.
What did you actually want to do your website?
Yeah, it was maybe around 2007.
Okay. All right, well, listen, Rebecca. Bless your heart for entering, bless your heart for entering. Really good ghost photograph and enjoy the video and the subscription. We'll switch over to the
Thank you so much, sir. Such a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you. All right, that is Rebecca O'Donnell, the winner of the radio and the winner of the subscription. Told you somebody was going to win. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Spooky Matter. Now, what today's going to be, as I mentioned, is a combination of also sentient ghost stories as requested. And we are in the process now of calling you. Now, we will augment that with open warning ghost stories. However, I want to serve up a warning to you. I want to be scared. If I'm not scared by your story, it's probably not a really good one. It's going to put a little chill, raise the hair in the middle of the back of my neck and put a little chill down my spine. I feel fairly easily. So it's got to be good ghost stories. You know, if we take one well, it's got to be good ghost stories. And I'm also going to make a special request tonight if you're an over-the-road trucker. And there was at least 4 or 5 of them out there. That if you want to hear a ghost story, you pull over safely into a ghost area or the side of the road somewhere where you're safe, so you can tell your ghost story with a good cell connection and with reasonable price in campus. Hello, Tennessee. Hello, Osage. How are you there, my friend? Let me try it again. Osage, are you there, buddy?
Yes, sir. How you doing?
I'm doing fine. I thought we had lost you for a moment. All right, so what's spooky in Tennessee?
Nothing. The story I have is actually whenever I was overseas in the military. First, I just want to say I'm a little nervous, so I apologize.
Oh, relax. So, this is like an alien. Oh, sorry.
Okay, yeah. I also want to give a shout out to Belgaz. To all the guys out there.
The Belgian people, well, once again, what I call them vicious, so that's description.
Yeah. Well, the story had to do whenever I was in the military. It was 2002, 2003. I was stationed overseas in Korea. I was at a family base, which is kind of far north. And
Let me stop you. What is it like? Now, I've been to Korea any number of times, but actually in the military, he's stationed in Korea. Well, put it this way, I've heard of our troops in Korea referred to in interesting ways, as though you're kind of there so that if the North starts a war, America's automatically brought into it. Is that how you guys look at it there?
kind of, I mean, well, a lot of people don't know, I guess, that we were never actually, we signed a ceasefire, we didn't have a peace treaty, so we were technically still at war.
That's right.
And they stationed me there because after the 9/11 happened, I wanted to combat, that's how I was going to go to Iraq. But they took me to Korea and said, so I got
that's going right now, right? That's pretty closer.
yeah, I did. We had riots and stuff up to the base and we had an accident. It's kind of a long story what happened, but
how much can people every year, South Koreans get together almost and they march on the gate, and I always thought, what is that about? These guys are down in South Korea where their freedoms and life, yeah, they're in great shape and just funding and let that march on. And I always thought, what they should have done was just open a damn gate, let them march on and just close it.
yeah, well, there's a lot of stuff that goes on that the public didn't hear about. The reason why they were riding over is because we had an accident where two girls were actually ran over by one of our truck vehicles. And I'm sure you can look about on the internet, but they were pretty bad. They were actually throwing the Molotov cocktail bombs over the fences. And we had some buildings put on fire.
But yeah, anyway, I don't want to stop you from the story. Proceed, please.
Okay, well, during the end of my time, I was usually whenever they do the last 3 months, they try to keep them on light duty so that they don't get injured. Because if they get injured, it's causes complications. So they put me on the unit police, which anybody who's been on the base over there knows what an MP is. It's kind of like MP, only you're a security guard, I guess. Yeah. So basically, I would be in charge of the gate, and they would rotate us around different gates. And I always liked the night shift because it's kind of a low person there. And so they take me to work on this gate, which I actually worked there whenever I was done. I was doing my time up in the upper part of we call it hall, the annual building area. And up there they have, that's where the last line of defense, I guess you even say for artillery. The North Koreans had their artillery focused on us, and the only thing we could do is store ammo inside the mountain in the big tunnel. So you get to the tunnel, you have to go to the gate, and that was the gate that I was, stationed at in charge of. So during the night shift, well, first I want to say that place had a reputation already. The people there, the Koreans, I've heard them talking before. And I remember one time early on when I first came there, I asked them what they were talking about, and the Korean guy told me, kind of laughed off. He said, well, they were talking about how that place is haunted, and this was in the daytime. I really didn't understand, what it was about. But I found out later that during the safety briefing we had, there was a soldier that was killed there. in the area, and it was pretty gruesome. He died when he was getting out the tire, and the split wing came off, and he killed him. Yeah, and it was probably instant death, but it was in the area that worked, in the area, you know. So, anyways, I was working there at night shift, and things were pretty calm. Nothing really happened. It was me and another person at all times. And we really didn't have anything happen. I mean, we had cameras there. It was really quiet. And one night when we were up there, one of the vehicles, and these are Hennis, these are pretty big vehicles, it just started on its own. And first we heard the rumble, we didn't know what it was. So we went outside the door, and I could hear it running. And we looked at each other, and that's when it really kind of got spooky because I've worked those machines and I know that we don't have those malfunctions just cut on their own.
Well, you know, just sort of our vehicle starting on something.
Yeah. Well, it kind of spooked both of us out, and I decided to go because it was I knew those vehicles to begin with, so he stayed in the guard check that we had, and I went over there to the vehicle, and first of all, I was really freaked out because it was in the dark area. So I had to kind of walk in the dark, and I looked around the vehicle, and I didn't see anything at all. So I opened the cab up, and I cut the vehicle off, and went back, went on our way, and we just started in the walk. Anyway, so that was the first time that happened, and we had similar incidents with the people where the lights had cut on. People had made in the walks about like similar incidents like us. Now I don't know if they took it serious or not because I don't think anybody, maybe nobody read the law. Because I mean that's like clearly has something going on. But later on, I guess it was maybe like a week or so, or maybe 2 weeks later, the horn on one of the Hennis, and I mean almost I think it was the same one, it might not have been, but it was in the same area, started just going off on its own. And this is like maybe like 2 o'clock in the morning, in the middle of the night, and we're both in there, and it goes off, and we're just like nearly jump out of our seats and fall down. So it scared the crap out of both of us,
What was that word that thing would start up and head towards me?
Yeah, and it was. I was actually so scared. I made the other guards get out and go with me, which we're not supposed to do because someone's going through the gate. And so, yeah, I mean, I actually had to go up there and undo the chain. And it was just really weird. I don't understand how it can happen. I mean, I don't know. If you think about drugs are really, how can they influence real things? I don't know, but I do know that a guy did die there. And,
yes, your story says,
yeah, it's too weird. Yeah.
I really appreciate your story. Thank you very much. A vehicle. Again, blowing its own horn. There you have it. A story all over yeah. And when you think about it, hoardings certainly would not be exclusive to any one area. They would be all over the world. And guess what? They are. Those hoardings are as famous in Canada, in Germany, and every other country in the world as they are here. In other words, ghosts are universal. Let's go to Radio Nevada and John. John, welcome to the Spooky Matter. Hello, John.
Yeah, good morning, Art. Major Roswell.
Well, morning, yeah. Maybe more research, but
Yeah, not really. Great to talk to you.
good to talk to you, too. Yeah, so you've got a story for us, I think.
Yes, I bought a house out in Eldridge, Iowa, and I only lived in it 14 months. I worked for Caterpillar, and they closed the plant, so I moved out of Iowa and moved out west here. And we were moving in, and I had just put a 9-drawer dresser into the one bedroom that was going to be my daughter's bedroom. And me and my son, he's 15, carried it in there, put it in. I went out to the kitchen to grab a cup of coffee, and I come back to the room, and I couldn't open the door. And the dresser had slid in front of the door. At first, I thought my son wanted my son.
The dresser slid in front of it. Now, was somebody in the room or no?
No, no one was in the room.
That's good.
Yeah.
Moved itself in front of the door.
Yeah. And I thought my son was in the room doing something, and I turn around and I'm hollering through the door, I said, open this up, I want to get this other stuff in here. And then he comes in from the front door with another box of stuff, I'm going, well, who's in here? So anyway, I had to pry the door open and slide that dresser out of the way to get back into a room that was empty.
That's just impossible.
Yeah, well, that's what I thought. And me and my wife sat down, had a cup of coffee, and you just bought the house. What do you do?
I know. I'll tell you. Did you buy it with an individual or a realtor or what?
No, it was a realtor. And I knew the guy that had lived there before, and he had never said anything about the house. I had worked with him in that cabin.
Yeah, no reports of ghosts, right?
No. And it was a very strange thing. And my dog would never go in that room. And we sat there and decided, well, this is pretty strange. So she said, well, it's not going to be my daughter's bedroom. She said, that's going to be your poker room then. And so I moved my dresser and the daughter into the other room. So all I put in there was my poker table and stereo,
How did you do at poker after that?
Not real well in that room.
I love the story because it's impossible.
And you sit there and you look at yourself, and I was looking at my wife and going, did this really just happen? Did I have to pry this door open to get in here? And it's like, it's
impossible. Yeah, it's impossible.
Happen any other way.
But no, it couldn't have. I really appreciate your story. That's 2 stories in a row.
Well, I want to mention one other thing. I had moved back to Iowa. My dad had Alzheimer's and stuff, and I was driving down the street, and I saw they had an open house at that house. And I was telling my girlfriend, I said, I used to own this place, and so let's go in and take a look, and I'm talking to the realtor. I did want to check. There was a little cheap under-the-counter kitchen light that I put in when I bought the place, and it was still there. But I talked to the realtor, and she said that house had sold 7 times since I had it. And so nobody ever stayed very long in it. I don't know if anybody else had trouble or not. But yeah, she says, I don't want to hear anymore. She's already going to be here all afternoon.
I completely understand. And despite the laws that say, now anyways, that you have house somebody, if the house is haunted, it was sold. Sold 7 times.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody ever mentioned it.
Yeah,
I bought it in, I think it was 82, and then I left in 83 when they closed the plant, and I moved back there in 2005. So it sold 7 or 8 times between them. So I don't know. Very strange story.
All right, thank you very much, my friend. Anyway, this is the second one in a row of, how can I put this? Things being moved without human interaction, or things being moved by the spirit. Vehicle started, moment goes, probably on the same vehicle, and now the real impossibility. I'm not sure moving something like that. After all, if anybody had moved that 9-drawer dresser up to the door and blocked it, they would then have to still be in that room unless they went sailing through a window. And he said his son was still outside. So that means something that we don't understand. And I guess the message would be, not this room. Obviously, Mom understood that message because she did not allow daughter in there. Jason in Louisiana, hi there, and thank you for coming on the air.
Hello, Art. Mega Roswell.
Okay. You have a ghost story for us, I think.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
This is a story about when my wife and I were newlyweds, and as newlyweds kind of do around that time, they'll go visit their parents, once a week or so. And my wife said she was going to go visit her mother. I said, that's fine. I'm going to go ahead and just stay home. I'm in my pajamas. And about 3 minutes later, she came back and she said, you're not going to believe what happened to me on the ride home. And me and the foolish young husband, I said, that sounds great, honey, but let me go ahead and just finish up this video game that I'm playing right now. And so that frustrated her.
You're already like a husband of about 2 years. I
was in hot water.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So she was a little frustrated, and it wasn't until the next day that I was able to get her to tell me what happened. Apparently, on the ride home, she had just left her mom's home, and she got the feeling that you get when you're being watched. And she looked off to her left, and she saw the classic shadow figure staring at her. And followed her.
This was when she was driving?
Yes, sir.
And the shadow person or whatever was moving by itself and keeping pace?
No, it was standing behind a sapling, which she thought she saw a tree out of the corner of her eye. And when she looked, there was a sapling, and the shadow figure was behind it, standing behind it. And as she drove past, its head followed her. She got the chills, and she picked up. She set up a little bit down the neighborhood, and as she made her way to the end of the neighborhood, the lights, starting where the creature was, started going out one at a time until it reached her. And the lights reached her. She stopped, and that classic fight or flight kicked in, and she got mad. She was angry. She was scared, but she was angry. So she threw the reverse, and she rushed back to the point where the creature was, and nothing was there. It was just a sapling, and she had a cold sweat, and she was just sitting there, and the car was idling, and all the lights turned on at once. And
you saw the wife with families. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's right. I would not have gone back. There's no way. So
it was game to the first time. She is a tough cookie. I'm not afraid to go out in public. She got my back.
All right, my friend. Thank you for the story. No, thank you. I guess insert myself into the stories as I hear them, and it's like, what would I do? It would be bad enough. You see the shadow being behind it. You see the head pop up, and the head follows you. The lights start turning out. Would I go back? No. I'm being honest with you. No. I would not go back. Down to Texas, and Chris. Hey, Chris.
Roswell, Mr. Bell.
Thank you, sir.
I'm glad to finally get in to talk to you since the first time I heard you. You're talking to Mel Waters. Yes, I've been a fan ever since.
The story goes that Mel sold his home to this. He sold his home to the government and moved to Australia, where he's living presumably happily ever after, but not sure. Anyway, proceed.
Yes, sir. 25 years ago, I was a brand new Border Patrol agent. We had more trainees than journeymen, so they would just stick two trainees together and say, go do your job. And usual shift, there might be 4 people working. We had 2 guys upriver, myself and my partner downriver. Very little experience between the 2 of us.
What would you, I hate this level, but I have to know some things. As a foreign agent, you said with very little training, I'm thinking, is somebody from Easy River, the River Grand? Is somebody down the River Grand and they say, watch?
It was very little experience in that training. I may have misspoke there. Okay. We had just gotten from the academy, but neither of us had a happy year yet. So they send us down and they tell us to go fight crime midnight. So we're driving down the river looking for anything that we could see that didn't look right, not really knowing what we were doing, but trying to get up job experience. We see a bonfire out on this hill we used to refer to as the party house. It was, at the time, it was out of town quite a ways, but now it's almost in town. And we drove towards it thinking, well, maybe somebody's down there, maybe some aliens, maybe some smuggling. And at the time, we had switches that we could throw that would turn all the lights off in the vehicle. So if you hit the brakes and backup light, nothing would come on. It wouldn't show where the vehicle was. So we turned on all the lights. We're driving down this long dirt road towards the river. As we come around the corner, there's about 15 or 20 people standing in a huge circle around a giant bonfire. They're all wearing brown, full-length robes. They got their hands up in the air, like they're doing some kind of religious ceremony.
Ritual.
Yes. I saw a movie called Race with the Devil with Peter Fonda and Orno several years before this, and that movie came to mind. I looked at these people just in time to see 2 of them turn towards us and start running at us in an aggressive manner, but like we didn't have any business in their little ritual.
Oh, I looked at them. This is on the U.S. side of the border,
Yes, sir. Right, 2 o'clock in the morning.
Gotcha. And let me tell you, and you were, I'm sure, 2 arms.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
But they were armed in Race with the Devil, too. Well, I looked at my partner, he looked at me, I threw it in reverse and I hit the gas. I said, I don't see any immigration violations happening here. I went backwards with no lights. I made a 90-degree turn. I didn't slow down until I hit the highway. Once we hit the highway, we're trying to decide what to do because our nearest backup is a good 20, 30 minutes away. There's one sheriff's deputy and he's way the heck out of town. Who would you report this to? Any department at the academy?
No. Local law enforcement? I don't know.
Well, we're out of town. We were in the county. And like I said, there was one deputy working and he was way the heck out of town. And we discussed it the rest of the night. Who should we report this to? And we could not come to a conclusion.
They weren't necessarily breaking the law, really.
None that I could see. Well, we decided that we just aren't going to tell anybody. And we're going to try and pretend like it never happened. And we managed to keep our mouths shut for about a good 20 years. Well, finally, about 3 or 4 years ago, I was invited to tell my story on the other show. And unfortunately, the night that they called the house for me to talk, I had a schedule change and had to work that night.
So you never got to tell the story?
Not to them, but it really upset me because I've listened to that show, like I said, ever since I was home. So a couple of weeks go by and I'm teaching a class. And I mentioned to the class that I'd almost made it on the radio. And I told them this story about what had happened to me and my partner. and how it would have been neat to tell people I've managed to tell my story to the entire United States and parts of the planet. And one of the students said, hey, you know, about a couple of years ago, I was driving around down by the river and I came across the exact same situation. Yeah, so apparently whoever these people are, they're still out there, they're still doing their little ritual, and I have no idea who they are or what they're doing. Exact same thing.
As you did, and as I would have done as well. I really are telling the story on real radio.
It was an exciting night.
Thank you, my friend. Take care. Glad you came by tonight. It's a personal matter. I really like this. Well, it's love stories. I suppose I was probably not host. But also, on the other hand, probably not the people that you would want to set. Ben in California, hi Ben.
Hey, is it me?
It is you, Ben.
Hey, Roswell. I've actually called in and told you my ghost stories before, but I've got one more story I haven't told you.
You told me those stories before?
I called in on the open line tonight. I was the guy who's been physically assaulted by ghosts.
Okay.
But I've got one story that I don't know if it's ghost or not, but it definitely qualifies as spooky. I'm living in Eastern Kentucky, growing up on this haunted hill. And besides the neighborhood there is a dirt road. It's a gas road. There's gas wells out there. And this is where we rode our dirt bikes and four-wheelers and everything like that. So nobody ever walks out there, but I didn't have any gas for my dirt bike one day, so I decided to take a walk out there. I'm about 15 years old, I'm a freshman in high school. And I'm walking back, I've got my machete on the side, I'm looking for snakes and whatnot, I'm looking for deer. And I'm looking around, and then suddenly there's two men in front of me. And this is a straight stretch of, I would say, 200-300 yards. And suddenly they're about 20 feet in front of me. So I tell them, well, you scared the what out of me? And one of the men says, well, I'm sorry. And they walked up to me and they asked me questions like, how did you get out of here? And I told them, well, I just live half a mile from here. And they said, they're just very confused. They say, how'd you get past the gate? And I told them, there is no gate. There used to be a gate there, but it had been ripped out a couple years ago. And in case the people like this only is for miles. This road runs for miles and miles, and a few miles the other way, there's no entrance, and it doesn't have a gate either. So anyway, that's a really great question. The direction they're coming from, they're coming from the direction of my house, and there's only one way in and one way out. And I'm thinking they should know there's not a gate there. So anyway, the whole time I'm talking to them, I'm really freaked out. I'm really freaked out. They're staring directly at my eyes, and they're not looking anywhere else. I'm listening to my house. I say I'm out here with my machete, and I'm looking straight. They don't look at my machete. They're both just looking for my eyes. And then anyway, yeah, you would think so, and be slightly interested. But only one of the men talking to me, but both of them are looking directly in my eyes. So anyway, I'm freaked out. So where do I gotta go? Because I never really see anybody out there unless they're riding a motorcycle or a dirt bike or a motor. But I start walking back towards my house, and we cross paths. And of course, I'm scared, nervous, and within a few feet. I take a few steps and I turn around, they're not there.
As in disappeared.
As in they are gone.
Maybe they vanished back into a time was a he.
Yeah, say that gate had been there a couple of years, and I don't really know what that was about. But I start walking fast. I'm really nervous now. You know, my heart's racing. I'm panting, and I'm walking fast. And I turn back. They're still not there. There's nowhere for them to hide, but they're not there. So I'm convinced that something bad's about to happen. So I'm running back to my house. And I reach the road again, and there's not a work truck there, there's nothing there. So I make it home, I run to the house, I slam the door, lock the door, so my mom's, somebody's trying to kill me, 2 men are trying to kill me. And so I freaked out for the rest of the day. So yeah, I didn't tell that story because I didn't know if it was a ghost story or not, but it was good.
No, it's yeah, it is. All right, occasionally I should say, I'm not sure what's going on story, but these odd things do happen. And I understand, sometimes you don't say it was a ghost. Kind of like my guess, actually. They asked about a gate that hadn't been there in a long time, and very I'm guessing they went back to whatever it was, time-wise, when the gate was there.
Roswell,
Thank you.
I hope Adrian comes back to the whole sack full of goodies.
She will, and she'll hide them for you.
That's when you and your daddy experiences, and sure you know what these cats are hiding spots are.
Usually, insurance, I grab Candy and run around the house without chasing me. I doubt you will work that.
Yeah, that's daddy's job.
Anyway, you have a story for us.
Yes, sir, I do. Picture, you're a corrections officer. Working midnight shift. And at the beginning of each shift, there's maybe a different one of the three, you send your officers out to do an external perimeter check of the sensors on the fence and make sure everything's where it's supposed to be and working.
I don't need any names, but I mean, is this a pretty sized prison or a jail or?
This was state institution.
Big one,
Jail. Pretty good size. Generally we run around with about a population of about 2350.
Oh, big one. Okay.
Pretty good size. And I was a zone sergeant, and my officers automatically went out and done their duties during the external perimeter check and the internal perimeter check.
Sure.
And the internal perimeter check not only included the inside bits, but also making sure that the doors and windows and everything was secured on the building. And part of the institution was handed over from the Department of Mental Health. And this one particular building, which was right across a service road from another old mental health building that had inmates in it. But the building in question did not. It was uninhabited. And down on the basement level, there was well, it's still there, an extremely heavy steel fire door. And about at least twice a week, for about 6 weeks, we would find this door open.
Fire door.
A fire door. And there's no alarms. This building was built about 1910. And my officer that was doing the inspection reported to me that this door open, and these are all deadbolt. And so we find doors open, not real frequent, but from time to time,
somebody would leave the building, on the evening shift. They had a class or something in there, and secure the door. But this building nothing was going on in there. And the problem is that to secure this door, no personnel whatsoever inside our perimeter has a key to that door. You have to go to the communication room where we were issued our keys and our radios and get this one specific key, which took authorization of the shift commander. And you had
again, this door is normally always dead bolted.
Yes. We had keys to all the other doors in that building except that one particular door. Nobody inside the perimeter had that key. Well, I had to get authorization from the captain to get the key in writing, and naturally he wanted to know why. Well, I just to keep the sergeant that I relieved, keep him out of trouble. I just told the captain that I wanted a security check. So got it. We went in. Me and 4 of my officers, we went in, turned up, done inspection, and the place was empty. And we secured the door. And I reported back to the captain, no results, everything's fine. And then the next day when I come in, I talked to the sergeant that was in charge on the evening shift. And he said, did you put it in writing? I said, no, I don't think there's any need for that. I ain't no sense of getting a whole bunch of other people involved in this. And so he said, okay, appreciate it. He said, on the evening shift, they done 2 inspections. And one of them was right around 10 o'clock at night, while everybody else was performing a count. They go around and do their same inspections as when they come on from their shift. This went on for about 6 weeks, and we kept.
This store was open every night?
At least twice a week.
At least twice a week.
And I'd still have to go up there in the comm room, call the captain, get authorization. Well, I did after about 3 or 4 weeks, he's starting to get really curious as to why I keep wanting to go in there. Especially, with that particular key, because I got keys to every other door in that building and everything in that building. So after about 6 weeks, it was getting pretty old, and me and my 4 officers, we went in, done our inspection. Well, this time the captain called an emergency count, and this was about 3 o'clock in the morning. And while they're counting, we were going in there and looking around, didn't find anything. Secured the door, and as we were leaving, we're going down a little service road in between these 2 buildings, and not a whole lot of light back in that area. A few security lights on the buildings, but the main lights was from the perimeter lights around the fence. And I happened to turn around and look up on the second floor window at the end of the wing, and I seen a little girl about 8 to 10 years old, blonde hair, and I just told my other officers, sure. So I said, look at her. What do you see? And all their jaws went slack and their eyes got about as big as silver dollars. I said, what did you see? Do you see a little girl? And all went, And about that time, she raised up her right hand and waved at us. And never seen her again. Never had any more problems with that door. Needless to say, that did not go on our reports.
Yeah, I wonder what her connection to that girl was. Maybe
there was an old mental health building. As part of our institution, especially we had two sides. And the side that I was on, we had about a half a dozen of these old mental health buildings, like I said, built around 1910, 1908.
Maybe she had a dad or a mom that had been in that building.
Well, there was children there too.
Children too?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, a few of my officers worked in there for mental health when it was still in operation. And
you've given us such a very much another story of, in my opinion, something that's been something physical that has been manipulated by something else. All the stories that we've had so far virtually have involved things physical by things. 6 weeks of a deadbolt opening? Well, I guess we'll just have to all wonder what's up with that. Great. New York, back in New York and Franklin, hello.
Hey, Art, how are you?
Fun.
Happy Halloween. This story takes place when my fiance Gina and I were living in Boston. We lived there in this building for about 2 or 3 years while I was in grad school. And about a month before we were leaving to move back to Brooklyn, we had the apartment packed up and everything, and we're asleep. I'm laying in bed and I feel someone above me just looking at me. And I'm like, in my head, I'm saying to myself, all right, if you're there, you might not want to be there when I open my eyes. And I'm just kind of joking, I'm not thinking anything of it. As soon as I say this to myself, I feel a gust of wind to my left. Now I open my eyes and I sit up immediately and I'm like, what is this? I look over and there is a man in our doorway, colonial dress, long stringy hair, bifocals, like a tall, thin Benjamin Franklin, okay? Now the man is illuminated. The only light that we have in our apartment is the bathroom door behind him that's slightly ajar. He is producing his own light, but his light doesn't reflect onto my door, my floor, my wall, nothing. Alright? And he's slightly translucent because I can kind of see the bathroom light through it. Now, this man is looking at us with curiosity. No malice, no nothing. I'm just staring at him with curiosity. I touch my girlfriend, and she wakes up, and she looks at the door, and she says, who's the man in white at the door? At that point, I really get freaked out because it was like confirmation. I turn to her, she goes back to sleep, I turn to him, and he's gone. Yeah, I wake her up. She tells me exactly what she saw, with exactly what I saw. She goes back to sleep. I cannot go back to sleep for the rest of the night.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so very much for that story. Now, isn't that interesting? In other words, it may well be that many times the apparition, or ghost, if you will, is a little bit as surprised at being in another place or time than it was used to. So it is as absolutely curious, perhaps even terrifying, as you are. And I wonder what that says about the other side. The mixing of that side and this side on also occasions. It may well be that they have absolutely no more of an idea than you do. Think about it. Let's go to Minnesota and Allison. Hi, Allison.
Well, good evening, Art, and happy Halloween.
Thank you.
My story does, well, I have a story that actually does involve things being moved without me moving them, but the story that I believe you are most intrigued in is my story of the time I saw a shadow person. And this story goes back about 15 years. I was 10 years old at the time, and I was downstairs. We lived in my grandma's house at the time, and we lived in her basement. And this particular night, my mom had left to go grocery shopping, but my bedroom was in the basement right next to the stairwell. So the only way to get in and out of the basement is on these very, very creepy stairs. If anyone would come downstairs, including our very fat cat, I would know about it. So I'm reading my book for school that night, and I'm sitting on my bed, and the setup of this basement was very odd. It was my room had two doors, one that went to the stairwell, and then another one that went into a very oblong bathroom. It was connected on the other side of this bathroom to our living room. And right by the doorway to the living room, there was a bathroom. My mom had a light on that. She left it on so that I wouldn't get scared while she was gone. Even though my grandma was upstairs watching TV. So I knew, in the way I'm sitting on my bed, I could see through the bathroom and then into the living room. I could see the light just in the frame. I go with the door that I can see through. And I don't know what compelled me to look out. But I looked out over my foot into the living room. And as I did so, a 6.5 to 7 foot tall, pitch black shadow. I could see the only definition it had was I could see shoulders, I could see a head, and I could see that it was wearing a bowler hat of all things. And it didn't bob up and down as people do when they walk in. It glided behind the desk from the living room into my mom's room, and it was gone. And I promptly threw my book across the room, opened the door to the stairwell, and ran upstairs and told my grandma. And she, of course, was very all that silly. Like this house, only my mom and I had just handfuls of experiences in this house. So she believed me when I got home. But the part that scared me the most about that shadow person is that it hadn't walked a foot or two behind this lamp that was very bright. And it did not have the shadow on the back wall behind it. It did not have any light reflect off it. It was like a cutout of reality. There was
This entity, ever seen it straight on, revision, right? Not perforation, straight on.
Absolutely straight on. I watched it go by and sat there and realized that I'd seen for a second before I turned pale and ran. There was really no malice to anything that happened in that house. It actually, in a weird way, helped me out one time. But it's still such an abnormal thing to see. I just couldn't deal with it.
Oh, I would too. My opinion. All right, listen, thank you for the story. That's a good one.
It's very
Thank you. Thank you. Like anyhow, I mean, I'm being honest with you. If I saw a creature like that, I know that you, perhaps all the rest of you are considering throwing away. But if I saw a creature like that, so-called shadow person, straight on, and then get float across the room, I would be so gone. Let's go to Andrew all the way down in Melbourne, Australia. Hello, Andy.
Hi, how are you?
Quite well, and I presume you have a story for us.
I do. It's the story involves my daughter's imaginary friend.
Okay.
For a number of years, my daughter had an imaginary friend that she described as a tall, old man that she named Roger. It was one of those textbook imaginary friends where she would talk with him, play with him, have tea parties with him, and sometimes even play with things. And my wife and I would always see her have conversations with an unseen person. And my wife did a research, and she just chalked it up to an overactive imagination. So my daughter at the time was an only child. And we basically thought that, the behavior was perfectly normal and age appropriate.
Well, you know what, though, it's still creepy. If you watch a child talking something that's not there, and even apparently getting answers, it's pretty creepy.
It's very creepy. And so my wife thought it was normal, but me having graduated from the ArT School of Ghost to Ghosts and other paranormal shows, I always suspected that she may be talking to a ghost. Having said that, we never had any paranormal activity in the house. We never saw apparitions or disembodied voices or red eyes in the closet. None of that. One thing happened that did freak me out is one day my daughter told me that Roger didn't like me. And that sort of made the hair on the back of my neck really stand up. And I said to him, why doesn't Roger like me? I'm a very likable guy. And he said, Roger doesn't like it when he throws cigarettes in his garden. And my daughter did not know that I smoked cigarettes when she was born. I sort of I cut down. I would only smoke when I was at work or late at night when she was in bed. But I would go outside, light up my cigarette, and then throw the butt in the garden. And I guess Roger wasn't very fond of life.
Oh, Andy, that's so freaky.
It is.
All right. Thank you very, very much. That is a freaky story. It really is. Being told not to do something by your daughter or possibly have known what you were doing. Oh, boy, that's creepy. I recently moved out to my family farm in East Texas, and as part of that, I joined the volunteer fire department out here. They married to me showing up at a meeting on Thursday. They invited in, they sent me home with a radio and pager. Saturday night, 2 days later, the pager goes off. And on the first line of the station, the chief and I taking a truck out for this accident. It's a rollover. The car has died, but the radio's playing, and I walked up looking, there's a guy kind of crumpled up in the passenger seat of the car because it's laying on the side. He's dead, yeah. And we were there for an hour. We had to wait for the police to come out, do their investigation, and the coroner and so forth. We cut the roof off of the truck, and he fell out. Cans came out, so he was drinking. We were people behind him. He wasn't going that fast. Just sort of swerved, went off the road, and smacked into a tree, and it cost him his life. Right. But when I was there, I could kind of sense that he was around. He was still there, and I could feel, and I remember feeling sorry for him. Like this guy, didn't know that his life was coming to an end. At least this one, anyway. That's right. But you sense he was right there. Yeah, looking around across the road a little ways back from the accident, and like, I don't see him, I didn't hear anything, but I could feel that I think this guy's standing there just looking at everything that went on in bewilderment, and I felt like all the other officers down on this guy because he was drinking and caused this fatal accident. So we walk up there, go back to the fire station, put the truck up. I drive my car back to the farm, which usually has other family members on it, but they were all in Dallas. They were a family event. And I get back to my house, and I couldn't, feel this guy with me. So I think he heard me home from the accident. Maybe in sense that you identified with him in a positive way, I'm sorry. But yeah, I think he could maybe hear my thoughts or emotions or someone was perceptive for that. Sure. But it freaked me out. I mean, I was just scared to death because, this guy is here following me home, and I don't know how to help him. And eventually I said that out loud. I'm like, I don't know how to help you. I'm sorry. And I was here for about 30 minutes, and I remember thinking, I wish my mom was here or someone else was here on the phone. I thought about them all being in Dallas. And eventually, in Norway, about 4 minutes after that, I get a phone call from my mom, and she said, I heard the phone ringing, brought the phone into her, and she called me back. This was like at 9 in the morning. And she said, hey, I just told her I was calling you back. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't make me phone call. What was the number from? Well, the number she gave me was my cell phone, and I just moved out here, and my cell phone gets no bars. It says no service on it. And I couldn't get any place to call, and the landline from the house doesn't have long distance, and her number is Al's number, so there's no way I could have called her. Oh my God. I think this guy, or the guardian angels that took him away, or whatever, sort of placed this call from company of these. That's a cool story. Thank you. Oh, yes, of course it is. Thank you so very much. Two of these things they do happen. That one from Texas, and I so appreciate it. I think that the dead is my firm belief that the recently dead do not part right away. They're still there for a while. For a long time, perhaps days, perhaps hours, perhaps days. But I firmly believe that they do this now. Let's move to, well, let's see. Let's move to Colorado and Francisco. Hello there.
Hi, how you doing, Art?
Very well, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. So yeah, I'll go ahead and start off. My story, it starts off, met a friend in Lutheran high school. Very, I guess, better way to put it, kind of a uptight religious school. They would teach us, Bible verses. We did go to Bible classes. None of that to me. I mean, I was already, born and raised in the church. However, the friend that I met, he really was there for other reasons. And I tried to, I guess, talk to him about religion from time to time, and kind of blew it off. He's like, well, why don't you come with me over to my house? He's like, this is what my mom and I kind of do in our separate time. So we go over there, and it has a real nice house, a lot of ornate, all collectible type of items. And one of the items that she has in this big open garden room area is a Ouija board. So convinces me, which going against everything that my mom had told me, don't do mess with that stuff because something could attach to you, it can follow you back if it wants to. Just leave it alone. While being a teenager, I was like, man, let me try it. So we gave it a shot, and got some interesting responses. And I was like, okay, I got to try it. That's that. So fast forward now, we're in our late 20s. I'm in school, and actually, I had just left college to move back in with my mom to help her with my grandmother. She was suffering dementia at the time, and my friend called us up about maybe 3:30 in the morning. December, so it was cold, snowing, and I could just hear in the other room, he's just crying hysterically, and I get up, kind of, confused in the days, asking, what's going on, and she says, he needs our help, we need to go to his house now, grab your things, let's go, and he lives, a few miles away. We get to his house, and he's standing outside in the snow with no shoes on, with just an undershirt and a pair of jeans, and immediately gets in the car, starts crying again. I mean, just shaking uncontrollably, probably from being cold and being scared. And as he starts to calm down, we asked him, what's going on? What happened in there? And he said, I came home, hanging out with some friends. He's like, and I smelled this awful smell, almost like sulfur. He's like, I paid no mind to it. I looked around the house. He's like, it's not until I came to my living room that I seen a man sitting on my couch. The man was very, I guess in his terms, he said the man was very good looking, very well kept. My friend had a dog, a Rottweiler, and this Rottweiler, instead of barking and going crazy, wanting to attack this guy, sat right next to the man. The man kind of just was stroking the dog. He said when he looked at his eyes were gray. There was no pupil, there was no white, they were just completely grayed over. And I don't know if there was some type of, there was no verbal communication, he said, but the look, maybe, not in his words, but maybe some type of the thought. He felt his thoughts were being read by this being. He said he just felt like his soul was being taken from him, and that this being knew that I have you right where I want you. When we got back to the house, like I said, he had already, in order for him to have gotten out of the house, I should have explained a little bit better, he had to break the window out of his bedroom. So my mom and I are like, do you have a key to get back in? The sun's starting to come up. like, 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. And we're all like, we really don't want to go in there, but let's go in there. So we finally make our way to his house. And the house is a wreck. Covers are basically torn off hinges. Food and dish plates are scattered all over the kitchen floor. There was even dog vomit in the living room, in multiple areas of the house. It was, like I said, I was born and raised in the church, and nowadays too many people, they want to recognize the good and not the whole, but there is evil out there. It certainly opened my eyes to it, because seeing what I saw and what I sensed, and just the atmosphere was heavy. That's walking in that house and just knowing that, why would my friend go to extremes to break a window in order to get out of his own home? And
it was terrifying.
Yeah, it truly was. And,
did he say anything about broken?
No, he said once he felt that, as I was explaining, he felt like just a part of him or part of his soul was just being taken by the entity. And he still, to this day, says it was the devil. But he says once he started feeling that awful feeling, he rushed to the front door. The door knob wouldn't budge. It wouldn't open, nothing. So that's why he decided to break out his bedroom window. It was everyone who I told this story after that, or familiar with my friend, they were shaking. I mean, and just terrified to think, like, that is something else. So we had that same day, we called some priests over to come and bless the house. And even the priests were, they had a look to them that maybe there really was something here that we can't explain. And during the prayer, my friend, the one who went through all this, he straight fainted on the floor. So I don't know if it was a possession and he was making that up, let's just say, but whatever happened, something happened.
Well, thank you very much. I don't think anybody makes up breaking out a window of their own house. Not for a second. The rest of it, I don't know, as he said. But if you thought that you were sitting across death, and the death that comes from you, was the same thing. Zach, somewhere or another on the site. Hello. Hi, ArT. Hi. Where are you? I'm sorry, Zach, where are you? Oh, I'm in Oakville, in Canada. Oh, okay. So I've got a story that happened last year. My uncle was staying with us here at my house, and we were talking one night, and he was telling me about all these horrible dreams he was having. Mm-hmm. And I mentioned it the next day, my friend who likes to dabble in the occult, and he suggested to me that we do a banishing ritual, whereby he would summon the negative energies and then banish them from my uncle's life, and also anyone that was in my house. So I mentioned this to my uncle after I talked to him, and he was down for it. So the next day, my friend comes over, and what he did is he set up 4 candles in the north, east, west, and south corners of the house. And he went outside. We've got a walk-up basement, so he was under my deck doing whatever he had to do for the ritual. Meanwhile, my uncle and I are sitting in a living room, and we were just told by my friend to just sit there in silence and just sort of, I guess, ponder life. Right? And not that long after it began, I got paranoid because I couldn't see all the candles. So I was concerned, one of them might catch fire or something. So I walked around the house periodically to check in on them. And I did around, and everything was fine. And I come back to the room, and the candle that was in the south side of the house where we were sitting started making this pinging sound. Just kept going ping, 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 and it would stop. My uncle and I look at each other, And we said, did you hear that? Mom says, oh yeah, I heard that. And a couple minutes later, it was ping, ping, ping again. And I said, oh boy, what's going on? So I go and check on the other candles, everything was fine. I get back, and also within our range of vision is the candle to the east. And the fire jumped from the wick to the case that the candle was sitting in. So I said, oh, besides, I don't care about this room, I gotta, blow this out. So I managed to blow up the fire around the rim of the candle case, and I kept the wick going. And again, I think, oh, what's going on now? Is it the rest of them? So I go and I check the candle on the west side of the house, and just as I get in, the fire jumps out of the candle and onto the dryer where it was resting. Oh my god! And I blow, of course, I blow that out, and instead of coming back, I'm panicking. My friend comes up the stairs and said the ritual is over, and I tell him everything that I just told you, and he says, well, to begin the ritual, I have to summon the energies from the east, so that's why the fire might have jumped, and then I banished them to the west, and that's why I jumped again. And I said, well, what about the south? And he said, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, it pinged several times, and it did throughout the half hour so you did the ritual. And he said, well, I have no idea why it did that.
Oh, that's for itself. I just lucky that everything didn't burn.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's good news in the sense that after he did the banishing ritual, my uncle stopped having all the nightmares.
Well, that is a good thing, but wow, what a story. Thank you very much. Yes, candles, really? California Blues, Mark. Hello, Mark.
Hey, Roswell, Guard, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
Great. Yeah, so I have kind of a crazy story for you. I'm 33 now, and about 10, 12 years ago, I'm in college, and I was about 20. I moved into a house with 3 other roommates, and it was about 2 blocks from campus, the University of Arizona, and it was built for the Tucson Electric Power Company president. So we move in and everything's fine, but then within a week, a whole bunch of weird things start happening. Literally, the electricity will go off, and you have to walk around and go to the breaker outside the house to turn the electricity back on in the house. And we had, over the course of the year that I lived there, we had 3 or 4 different electricians come out to check out to see what was wrong with it, and everybody said that it was fine. So there was strange electric stuff that would always happen. One time I was using regular fan opener, and the electric fan opener actually started to go off by itself. But one of the really creepy things was that we didn't have tables because we were 4 college students. And I knew that my roommates weren't home one day, and I wanted to bring the stove back. So I'm back to my place, and when we get there, I say, hey, let's watch a movie. And so I turn on the TV, and there's that staticky, that snow that you have when you don't have cable. And suddenly there's this bang in the other side of the house, and it's like sounds like she was crashing. And she says, what was that? And I said, I don't know, but I swear there's something really weird with this house. It's haunted. And suddenly from the TV, the snow, the static on TV, it said, no, there's no ghost here.
And no, that's not so. Well, I want to be unusual, but I mean, a lot of times voices and things are heard from white noise, and that's what made on the TV was white noise. So,
well, it was so creepy. I mean, I turned off the TV and I looked at her and I said, did you hear that? She said, yes. And I said, well, what was that? And she said there's no ghost here. And we ran out of the house. She kicked me out. But another thing that actually happened.
there was an easy answer.
Yeah, so I was filming. We had a party one night, and I was going around filming using night vision in the house. And I go with my friend Gentry and just ask him, "Hey, how you doing?" And he says, "Oh, good, whatever." The next day when I'm watching the tape, and we go and all of us are watching the tape the next day, the party the night before. And suddenly it goes into his room, and I say, "Hey, how you doing?" And it was the most demonic sound that was captured on the tape. Right when he said hi, it was like this horrible, horrific sound. And the weirdest part about that is that it's been years since all that happened. And for some reason, about a month ago, I was driving with my girlfriend, and it was 11 o'clock at night, and that story kind of, for some reason, I just remember it right then. And I asked her if she believes in ghosts, and I told her the story, and I had recorded the EVP with my friend Gentry. And I thought to myself, man, I need to call him. I haven't talked to him in a few months. I hope everything's okay. And the next day, I got a phone call that Gentry was in a coma. And unfortunately, about 3 days later, he passed away. But the odd thing about that was I just remember that story like randomly. And I asked my friend Emily, when did he, slip into the coma? And she said it was around 11 o'clock on that Saturday night, which was literally, I think it was like 11:15 that I was telling my girlfriend that story. So I don't know if there was some sort of like reach out or connection or something, but it was just something that really kind of like touched me and freaked me out a little bit.
Well, maybe you should go into the EVP investigation.
I'd rather not. I'd rather leave that be.
Thank you very much for the call. Let's see here. That's a completely uninvited EVP. Television just fine. Right now, it's in the background. It is the ideal medium for EVP. Normal, ideal medium. All right. Let's go to Texas and Roland. Hi.
Hello, Mr. Brown, is you?
It is.
Well, I recognize your voice. Nice talking to you. But here's mine. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
I have an experience. It's not a story. This happened to me, so it's very, very disturbing and unsettling. But happened in one of my dreams that came to me, and I was asleep. And at the time, I was living and working in Phoenix about 10 years ago or so. And in my dream, I woke up and I was in a unknown city to me anyway, because it was kind of like New York or Chicago style, a lot of people downtown, going to work, all dressed up in suits.
That's when one essence woke up in the same city.
Yes, sir.
Uh-huh.
And in my dream, I'm climbing the stairs to go up to like a high-rise building, and I'm not exactly how high it was, but it had been at least 20, 30, 40 stories.
Right.
And people are in big cities like that, they go by you and not pay attention. So I'm really not sure what I'm doing there, but I know I have to walk up and I get some the elevators. So for whatever reason, that's where I'm being pushed toward.
Okay.
So I get to the elevator, and one of them, there's a bunch of elevators, and those big, you have 3 or 4 on one side and 3 or 4 on the other side. So it must have been good, half a dozen elevators. So I'm standing in front of one, and the doors open up, and a bunch of people rush in and fill in, and carrying briefcases and purses and stuff, and it started to crowded for me. So I think I'll catch the next one. I wasn't in any particular hurry. So I wait for the next one, and that one opens up, and the doors open up, and there's no one coming out, and there's really not a crowd any longer. I'm really the only one when you get in. So the doors open up. I notice, I guess what you call an elevator operator. And he's standing up on the there, and he's dressed very sharply, nice dress, and very trimmed up, and very professional looking.
Yes.
But he had this sense or an aura about him that wasn't natural. So before I actually stepped in, the doors were wide open. He's standing there with his hat holding his hands and looking at me and smiling, and I picked up right away, who he was, and I got the feeling that he was sick himself. And
This is all a dream, right?
Yes, it's all a dream.
Okay, so as opposed to an actual ghost encounter, this is a dream, or did it manifest in real life?
No, it's been manifested in real life, but this is how it started. This is the reason I say that when the doors open up and I had this sort of a fear, like you stepping into it, I stood there still on the outside of the elevator, the doors open, and he kind of just asked me, well, are you getting in or not? And I go, well, am I going up or am I going down? And every time it basically was going to heaven or going to
heaven. When you're in a dream, you know what you're doing.
Yeah, so, but I had the feeling that it was not a good choice to get it right away. So I was basically asking him if I was going up towards heaven or down towards hell. I had that feeling that maybe I had died in my sleep. And so then he just looked at me and goes, well, there's not a whole lot of difference for you. So, and then that's kind of when I woke up. I woke up wide awake and I was sweating, and that's it's been a question for me ever since. I don't know what it means, but
well, what it means is probably since you made no choice at all, it's purgatory for you. But it was a dream. Now, to Anthony on the side. Hello, Anthony.
Hi, how are you?
Very well. Where are you, Anthony?
I'm in Stillwater, Minnesota, about 15 minutes outside of Minneapolis.
Oh, all right. You have a good ghost story, I hope.
I do, but I'll tell you what. My wife had sent in part of the story to the wormhole to you.
Yes.
And what I want to do is, because she can tell us so much better than I can, it's really a phenomenal story. So is it okay if I introduce Priscilla as her name?
Okay, you're breaking up on me a little bit. You're going to put her on the phone. Is that what you're going to do?
That's right.
All right. Let's have her.
All right, Priscilla.
Hello.
Hey, Sarah, hi there.
Hi. Roswell's.
Roswell's. Thank you.
So our ghost story, we live in a house in historic Stillwater, Minnesota, built in 1860 something.
Mm-hmm.
And we have pretty much had some kinds of things moved in here 2 years ago in April. It started with whistling, like kind of muffled whistling, not wind or pipes or anything. Believe me, I know what those sound like. It was somebody whistling it to me, and then I would start to hear like old record music playing, and I went outside to see if some kid was sitting outside out front blasting their car stereo, and nobody in sight. It was only from the house. And then things started to escalate more and more. There would be the sounds of like a glass sitting down on a table, and maybe no one home. And I was out front of our home, and there was no one inside, and I heard a knock coming from the inside of the front door. So I was a little afraid to go back inside the house at that moment. Things escalated more and more after that. Knives, my kitchen knives, would fly off of the table in the kitchen, and we've hardwood floors. And yes, and it wouldn't just fall down flat, point down and snap into the floor inches away from my husband several times. He is fortunate that he hopped out of the way quickly.
This is how I begin to think about moving.
Yes, we actually have been talking to real estate agents, friends, anybody looking for another house to live in.
I've seen in the movies where knives slowly pull out of the holder and sometimes head through midair towards somebody. No, that's right.
Yeah, that's pretty much what was happening. And then I was sitting on our couch, and the TV screen, the TV's off, you can see the reflection in it still.
Sure.
So I was just kind of staring up in the space, and I saw in the reflection walking towards me a full-bodied it was not even out of the corner of my eye. I could see it correctly, but in the reflection of the TV, a full bodied, it was a man, it was a figure, and it was walking right towards me. I screamed, jumped up. My husband said, "Oh my gosh, what's wrong?" And then it disappeared, and that was horrifying.
Yeah, I did. But actually, the knives would have been, but then, so, tell me you did move.
We are still here right now, actually. The spirit here will usually cut off our cell phone conversation, like it'll drop a signal on our cell phones if we ever talk about it. Like the spirit while we're in the house, like if I call my mommy and talk to her about how I'm scared about the ghost. So we'll even cut off on our home landline. Just drop the phone. I'm surprised, actually. I told my husband while he was waiting on the line, I hope it doesn't cut us off the Skype.
I know, there's someone else, I'm amazed.
Well, there's one more thing I got for you. I had a strange feeling in our backyard. Our landlord had dug up our old deck. It was rotting and falling apart, and he put in a new one. And he does big, post holes for the deck. He kind of dug up the whole front half of the backyard. So, well, it hadn't been dug up basically since the house was built. I was walking our little tiny teacup chihuahua, Ellie, outside in the backyard. I saw something on the ground in the dirt that had been dug up. It was a human tooth. So I did a little more digging, and I found probably at least 50, 60 human bones in the yard. Yes, recognizably human parts.
At this point, you call the police.
Yes, we're gonna. Yeah, and some very old coins. My husband just reminded me from early 1900s. It was a little disturbing because.
No, that's not a little disturbing. That's really disturbing. And I know once I get in my backyard and I start finding bones, that's it. I stop. I call the police. But how many bones, please?
I'd say about 50. There's probably near a full set of teeth, and several large. I'm gonna assume they're like phalanges, fingernails, and but they're all. It doesn't look like somebody just. My friends tell me, "Oh well, a long time ago, people would just bury their loved ones in their yard if they couldn't afford a funeral." And I said, "Well, that sounds a little odd to me, anyways." But if they're all in like hacked up pieces, which doesn't, I try to rationalize it like, well, I can't really actually.
Hacked up pieces, not good. None of this is any good. I don't know, maybe you should call police, maybe you should call police.
I know, we actually have a friend of ours, her family is friends with the Dalai Lama. So he blessed some herbs, like some incensey herbs for us to burn in the corners of the house, and we're gonna.
So you actually have the Dalai Lama told about this?
Yes, and the Dalai Lama personally blessed and sent us herbs to kind of. We're supposed to burn them. I think like, is it every room? Asking my husband. Every room in the house to get rid of the evil and try to get out whatever's in here because it's more and more almost every day. Well,
why are you still there?
Oh, trust me, we have been looking at every single possibility we can to try to find another house to rent, buy, apartment. There have been times where we've thought about, packing up all our pets. We have a cat and a dog and a turtle and a hamster.
I want to find out and actually do it.
Yeah, I know, just.
Oops. Hello? Oh my. Vicky in Michigan, hello. Vicky in Michigan. Are you there? Oh, Vicky's doing this for a chance. Well, sorry about that, Vicky. We'll move on. Let's see where to go. Let's go here to John in California. Hello.
John, here.
Hello.
Oh, Roswell's art.
Thank you. Who was that?
Yeah, that was my girlfriend.
Good. I don't know. We're getting voices coming out all over the place here. Okay, go right ahead.
Well, good to talk to you again. Next year, the Ouija board, that sucks. My parents had a restaurant. I was probably like 17 or 18, I think it's in the email. We caught this thing, apparently. And one night, it got nasty.
The phone got nasty.
It claimed it was a female. And it said it was from hell. I can't confirm any of this. So I don't know if it's real or not, but what happened?
They told me on the Ouija board that it was from hell.
Yeah. And we spoke to many times. And one night, me and two of my friends were there. Three bright flashes came out of the mirror, and they were blue. Electrically propagated, I guess, out of the mirror. There were lights coming up there, but they were not oil lights. So there were three bright flashes out of the mirror, and they were blue. So, we got really scared when we ran out of there. We were there for 2 hours. And I had to sit back because we left everything on in the place. We weren't supposed to be where we were at the time. When we came back, the light outside turned on the phone. There was no motion sensor on the phone. It was probably 87, it was probably 87 or 88. Mm-hmm. Then we drove on again. Came back in. Everything off. We were scared. Scared. It was a whole story, but an update, maybe 2 years ago, the staff was freaked out by doors slamming. I can't confirm this, it's what I heard. But the doors slamming over and over. They killed with knives. I moved away from it a long time ago, but I don't know, something happened, and that's pretty much my whole story.
Okay, well, I appreciate you again. You say it was, I presume. Those hauntings are real. Now, as you listen to these stories, it's not people out there making them up. These are real occurrences. They really do happen. So, ghosts or apparitions or whatever it is you want to call it have to be considered to have substance. Not the word you would normally associate with something non-human, right? But substance. That's a fair way to put it. Here's somebody that's been waiting. Michael in Virginia. Hello.
Hi, ArT. This is in Virginia, right? And this story, we're currently living in Virginia, but the story took place about a haunted home that we purchased in Ohio. And I'm convinced that the house actually picked up. Because we had spent weeks looking through these little realtor magazines. One evening, my wife said about 2:30 in the morning, she said, I found the place. I said, funny, I found the place. She said, well, we'll look at it in the morning. So the next morning, we had picked the same house. So, and we missed some of the early clues about, this house, like the sage on the mantle when we moved in. It started really benign with like whispering and just hearing noises. But a couple of the strangest things that happened was one night we were listening to you and Father Gordon Malachi was on. And someone had asked him, is there any danger with even talking about this stuff? And he told you, he said, ArT, I think you asked him the question, he said, ArT, he said, even talking about it now can be a problem.
That's right. Something you should be thinking about right now.
Well, and what happened? Words no more came out of his mouth. And we heard this god-awful racket in the closet. And our cat ran over to the closet. My wife jumped up from her computer, and we opened the door, and it sounded, if I could describe it, it sounded like a bird, a large bird, thrashing in the closet. Opened up the closet door, nothing. And the cat ran out of the room. I mean, that was kind of strange. But probably the oddest thing that happened, my wife was working on her doctorate, and she had gotten up early one morning to go do some research on the computer, and the computer room was just like maybe 5 paces from the bedroom. Well, so as not to disturb me, she closed the bedroom door. And I could hear her typing away on the computer, and it was, and I'd, sleeping in. And all of a sudden, you heard bam, 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 3 loud knocks on the bedroom door. I thought, well, that's odd. She must have locked herself out. I get out of bed, I reach for the door and open it, and my wife is reaching to open it from her side. And she said, "Why are you knocking on the door?" And I mean, it's just, you talk about, gee, why don't you move out of this place?
Yeah, really, you see sage. That's the big tip-off right there.
Or it really should have been. And I just want to tell you one cat story. I know you're a cat fan here. We had a cat, little cat Scrap, so we had for 13 years. And we were moving to Virginia, and she was in really, really poor health, and we decided to have her euthanized before we took her to Virginia, before we moved to Virginia. Well, my wife and I were saying, she had this little cage, like a travel cage, she used to love to sleep on in the kitchen. And my wife and I were in the family room, and all of a sudden we heard this god-awful racket. If you can imagine somebody just bouncing this cage around the kitchen. I jumped up off the couch, cat's on the cage is coming off the ground 5 or 6 inches, bouncing straight up and down. It wasn't good. The cat jumped off, and about the same time I hollered at my wife and said, "Come in here, come in here, come in here. You gotta see this." And just as she came, and this thing continued to bounce hard for probably 10 seconds after the cat got off. And I'm not talking just like shaking, I'm talking straight up, straight down, straight up, straight down. And just as my wife came around the corner, it stopped. So, but this house had just so many little things like that, and probably the very worst. And I didn't tell my wife this until after we moved out of the house. But we had one time we had 3 cats, and we had our pantry down in the basement, and I'm coming up the steps, and I'm not afraid bad things will bother me because we lived in this place for 13 years. But all of a sudden I heard this low, guttural kind of growling coming from the corner of the basement. And I thought, wow, that sounds like the cats are really getting me get into one, That's what I'm telling myself. But the hair is standing up on the back of my neck. Well, just as I get to the top of the steps, I look over, and all 3 cats are curled up in the sunlight coming through the kitchen window. There wasn't a cat down in the basement. Not at all.
All I can tell you, sir, is take sage advice and don't live in peace like that. Little cat thing jumping up and down and growling in the corner. Really bad. Let's sort of say you're on the air. Hello, it's Otto, I believe. Oh, it's me? It's you, yes. Uncle, where are you calling from? I'm calling from Finland. Finland? Oh, yeah. Okay, welcome. Well, I'm glad Finland. Can't believe it. I'm actually, I was shocked. Well, yes. Yeah, well, oh yeah. Rosas, first of all.
I'm a big fan of yours. Been for a long time.
Finish Roswell's. Excellent.
All right, yeah. Well, it's goes on to today, so I guess I'm gonna go for a story too. And I hope you understand my bad English.
So far, so good.
Okay. Well, this is actually a second net story, so at first I started to tell you, but second net is it's a good one. Well, I have a friend who works as a security guard, and there's a mansion nearby, and he has to like go around it very often, once in a day or so, go around all the rooms and so forth.
That's what a security guard does. Yes, you have to have all the heads.
And he has an electronic clock when he goes when he checks out.
Yes.
And he has to put the right code in there, and so when he puts the right code, that's well, kind of goes in there alarm on mode. So if there's someone in the mansion, it of course alarms the local police or so forth. So you put the right code in and wait for the right thing on the green light or so forth, and well, the story goes that he puts the right code in, and what's good, instead of very good the green light like always, but you get also nice lasting. I know you like guys, especially like ghosts. Anyway, you put the right code in, and you hear a child laughing. Of course, you disable the alarm system to check if there's really a child in. Well, you go in, so totally dark, you can't see anything. Can't hear anything either, so you just when you go out and put the code on again, and well, you see the green light going again, seeing that okay, the alarm system is on again, and you just wait, and you hear start again laughing. So you just what else is to do? You just have to put the alarm on again and check the inside again to see if there is anyone inside. But there's no one inside. What can I do? You just have to go outside again and put the code again, and after that, well, it didn't appear again, but anyway.
Something. So, in other words, it was something. Once does it again and again and again, like that alarm system, or you get something that you probably don't know. All the way from England. Okay, let's make another choice. Always hard to choose, but we'll go to Mexico and Candace.
Well, happy Halloween, Art and Roswell.
Thank you.
I have a ghost story for you. In the late summer of 2011, a really close friend, Holly, moved to Louisville, Kentucky. So on Halloween weekend, another friend, Debbie, and I went to visit her. And she had lined up a ghost tour. And this is something that you walk around downtown Louisville, and they bring you here and there. And there were 5 or 6 stops on the trip. And,
Very interesting, but I guess on the tour you don't really expect to see a ghost.
no, and to top it off, up until we arrived at the Brennan House, the main event had been the wind chill index. It was so cold, and we were hanging behind the rest of the tour group. There was another lady that had hip surgery recently, so we were going to hang back with her. And we arrived at the Brennan house. This is a historic mansion. And a family had lived in it for a couple of generations, and they were doctors and lawyers, a very talented family. But there was a lot of everybody crowding around the fence, trying to get photographs of the ore that the guide was telling us we were sure to capture. And we hung back, let everybody take all their photographs, and as people were starting to trek off to the next place, we stepped in and started taking a few photos. And suddenly, I have both feet firmly planted on the sidewalk. And by the way, this was a reasonably dark street. There's nobody on the street. And Holly and Debbie are walking away, and I'm like, okay. And suddenly, I am roughly shoved in my left shoulder, hard enough to knock me off of my feet forward. And I'm thinking, okay, somebody shoved me. I turn around to tell them how rude I think they are. And, all right, there's nobody in the street. Nobody there. And my first thought was, don't scream, go get the girls. So I quickly walked toward them and I said, you guys come back here. I swear to God, somebody just pushed me, and they're like, there's nobody here. And I'm like, exactly. We dashed back, and the three of us were standing in front of his house in the dark, and we're taking photographs, and I just had the feeling that, like, the hair on the back of your neck stands up. And I felt like somebody was approaching me, and I knew we were the only three there, and I said, Debbie, I'm still taking photographs. Debbie, there's somebody around us, and I said, take pictures with me. I feel like there's somebody by me. And so she did. And as a matter of fact, I entered this photograph in the photo contest.
Oh my.
Yes, it was.
Okay, explain me, since I'm not there, what came out in the photograph?
Well, it's hard to explain. I've never seen that kind of light anomalies in a picture, first of all. A lot of light streaking lights. I'm holding still in the photograph, and none of us are real proficient photographers. We just rely on auto schmoto cameras. But particularly just behind me, up at the top of my head, there's a man there. And he has like a pasty face, dark eyes, deep dark eyes, and like an old timey haircut where he had like a little pompadour thing in the front, maybe.
And you're telling me everyone if this man was out there?
No, there was no one but a stray ladies on the street.
Oh, okay. One thing every mistake is getting pushed. I mean, we know we're pushed.
Exactly. I mean, and Debbie's taking these photos, and she's not saying anything. She thinks she's photographing me. And so she turns and takes some more, and we're like, okay, now we're really behind. We got to get going. And I'm just like, okay, this is weird. And so we finish the tour, and we all go back to Holly's house, and hit the sack, and we wake up in the morning, and we're all getting our coffee on, and we're in our jammies in the kitchen, and then we have our stools pulled up to the counter, and we're just looking through our photographs, and I happen to take up Debbie's camera. And like, what are all these lights in this photograph? And to myself, and I'm looking at like, oh my goodness, this can't be. I mean, you don't even anticipate looking at the photograph of yourself. And I said, oh my God, Debbie, look at this photograph. And she took the camera from me, and just temper straight.
Absolutely. I'm the way. You might expect lights. Words, I don't know, like words have been said to be souls. And I don't know about that. Choice of light, normal, is everything, right? But, one getting shoved by somebody, not normal, and not food. A man carrying a photograph, there was a man. Colorado's been hanging her down.
Hey, Art, how you doing, Roswell?
Thank you.
When I was in college, I worked at one of the most haunted radio stations in America. It was
Actually,
oh, really? Well, I didn't know that when I took this job. I was an overnight DJ on a classic rock station. It was K-Sky Radio in Deadwood, South Dakota. And the address, believe it or not, that serious, was 666 Main Street, Deadwood, South Dakota. So we think it was a portal for ghosts because of the strange address in Deadwood, South Dakota, 666 Main Street. But everybody that worked at the radio station knew about a ghost named Doc Smiley. He was a dentist from the 1880s to the 1920s in Deadwood, and he had a dentist practice at the location of the radio station in the second floor where the radio station was located. We were located right across from the number 10 saloon where Wild Bill Hickok got shot and killed by Jack McCall, in the 1800s. There's a lot of history in that town. A lot of people met untimely deaths in Deadwood, South Dakota, and that's why I think there were a lot of ghosts in that town too. And one of them used to hang out at the radio station and do crazy things especially overnight. One of my so you said there overnight one night. You remember the old AP teletype machines that used to come over? One night we were there, and the dentist office was converted into a newsroom. And through double pane glass, we looked through the glass and we saw a man standing there in an old West garb. And we thought that was pretty strange. We walked around the corner and nobody was there. So he was gone. And then another time when we were working there, for a reason, whenever we played Led Zeppelin's Whole Lot of Love, we used to kind of kick up at that radio station. Crazy things would happen. We would have clocks on the wall would turn upside down. That we used to play that had the commercials on. You would find them stacked weird or turned upside down. Just okay.
Actually, what it says, for example, if you play the card and you don't allow it to reach you, it would automatically turn it upside down and remind yourself to it.
You're right. Yeah, that's true. So you remember how we used to stack those? Well, they would be all, changed around if you walked out of the room and came back. So it was just crazy things like that used to happen when you worked overnights at that radio station. Through the corner of your eye, you'd see dark figures walking down the hall. Doorways would creak and slam by themselves. And one night I was working late during a blizzard. And about 2:30 in the morning, I heard a really loud demonic roar come from down the hallway. So I thought I was one of my friends playing a trick on me. So I went running down the hall to see if I could catch him. Went down the stairs, and it was a snowstorm. I looked out the door, and there were no tracks or anything. So I knew that nobody else was at the station other than me. So it kind of freaked me out the rest of the night.
I'm sure there are so many stories. I don't know why radio stations are the target audience, but they are. Now, I don't know why any radio station, would allow itself to be marked as 666 in their address. I was going to say to Michael, maybe.
My story kind of
Remember your friend. Yeah. You don't have good audio. A little bit or something.
Yeah. Is that better?
Oh, actually a little more.
Okay, well, that better?
Well, not really, so just say it and talk about it.
Okay. I moved into this house 12 years ago, and every evening between 7 and 9, there's a thump at the door. It's like someone hitting it, not knocking. And through the years, I go to the door, look out the peephole, and nothing's there. And so I just kind of blew it off as, it's my ghost. Well, one night I decided, okay, I'm going to go outside, sit out there and see if this is the kids or what. And I went outside and I stayed out till about 9:30. I'm back in the house and sit down. And so, I don't know what this has been going on for 12 years. And I called you about 3 weeks ago and told you that my cat sees something flying around the room. And you told me that you don't want to know what it is because if it would get a hold of me, it would tear me up. It's haunted me ever since. And it scared the hell out of me.
Michael, and thank you very much for the call. SCB says there's absolutely no question about it. Anybody with count knows. Texas Brewers Rock.
Hi, Mr. Bell. How are you this evening?
I'm great, thank you.
Well, happy Halloween. Well, we only got 25 minutes left here in Texas. My story is about my twin brother, my identical twin brother, with whom I was extremely close. Back in 2003, December of 2003, he took his life. And obviously it was crushing beyond words for me. And in the weeks and months following his passing, we were close. Even for twins, we were extraordinarily close. And so from the very beginning, I sort of always felt that I would receive some communication from him. I didn't really have doubt. I had doubt as to how it would happen, and if it happened in a place that would make other people think I might be insane or something like that. But I really thought it would happen, eventually. But as the months, and this is, now 3 or 4 months into after his passing, I had not yet received any communication from him, and I was very. I just wanted to know he still existed. I didn't at that point. I was still in shock. I was pretty fearless. I thought, even if the Catholics are right and they go to the bad place, if they do something like that, well then I can figure out a way to get him out of there somehow. I really just wanted to know he still existed. So I got on one day to work, and this was, again, probably 4 or 5 months at the most after his pass. I was working a very manually intensive job, so I would come home sweating and grimy and working off some next, and this, by April it's already in the 90s at least. Sure. And so we'd come home, immediately take a shower, get grime off, and I was in the shower, and all of a sudden a song came into my head, and it was I didn't attach any significance to it at the time. It was a song from Paul's favorite band of all time, called the Smiths. And so I exercised my God-given right as a person living by myself to sing in the shower, which I immediately started doing. And within 1 or 2 seconds of my starting to sing the song, which I did not think of, the song came to me and sort of asked to be sung in an odd way. I think whenever I started singing it, well, within, before I got probably the first full line of the song out, I instantly knew my brother was fortunately not in the shower with me. He was right outside the shower, and I knew exactly the elevation of where he was. I knew how far away from the shower curtain he was. Everything about him was there. And the feeling was so strong, I had absolutely no need to look beyond the shower curtain to see if there was any wispy smoke or, if there would be wind in my hair. I mean, it was yes. Right.
Okay, I understand that's very comfortable for you, and I don't know how to interpret that, whether I can